Maintaining who you are in a relationship without losing sight of it is something that a lot of people struggle with in new or developing relationships. And there's something I want to talk to you about this phenomenon, right? There's two terms that I love. One is called, and I actually had to write these down because I do get lost in the translation, but one is called interpersonal differentiation. And this is a term that we use in psychology that references maintaining your own identity and perspective within relationships. But this is in conjunction with or in comparison to or alongside of another term called intersubjectivity, meaning that someone else can have their own internal experience and a perspective and it not be yours. Meaning that like you can acknowledge and or look at that another person has their own internal experience and their perspective of that experience does not need to be your own. And the reason I bring this up is because one of my friends today said that, I find it interesting that not very many people can be told something about themselves and not immediately accept it as true. Like they don't have the ability to be introspective enough to be able to look at it and go, actually, that's not accurate. And I said, what made you come up with this train of thought? And she goes, well, I've learned a lot about myself recently where a lot of people project onto me themselves. And there was a point in time in my life that what they projected, I accepted was true. I was like, yep, that's true. And I just immediately, and like the older I got, the more that I understood, the wiser that I became, the more I became to accept that just because it's true for you doesn't mean it has to be true for me. And I was like, there's actually a term for that. I can't think of it right now, but there is in fact a term for that. The ability to filter information being told about you, about an experience within yourself, that you don't necessarily have to accept as true or even like partially true, entirely true, nothing like that. And it's called intersubjectivity, that they can have their own internal belief about an experience, their perspective about an internal experience that they can share or they can attempt to put on you, they can project onto you, that you yourself don't have to accept as your own internal experience with the same thing. But then this bleeds over into the interpersonal differentiation, that within a relationship dynamic, you're not intended to get lost into the belief that another person's identity or experience is your own. That their perception or understanding of the identity of the relationship does not have to be yours. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of people, a lot of you, will get very strong opinions about people, places, things, circumstances, whatever out there in the world, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a movie, heck, whether it's a friend group or a person in the friend group or a family member or something, that you create this hyper-specific internal perspective or belief on or about, despite either having your own experiences with or not having any at all, and you don't filter it against those circumstances or experiences, or you don't filter it against the fact that their perspective doesn't have to be yours. That you could both sit and watch the exact same movie and walk away with two different opinions, or go to two different restaurants, or to go to the same restaurant and walk away with two different opinions, that their perspective does not need to be yours. But the more intimate the relationship becomes, the more significant you become in terms of relying on that relationship, the more likely you are to accept their perception as your own. And you lose that interpersonal differentiation, or you start to lose the intersubjectivity aspect of thought. Okay? And so the reason I share this with you today is because it is in fact possible that the perspective that you have can be your own without it being someone else's, meaning that you do not need to get someone else to accept your version of events or reality, that it can be your internal experience, even if it isn't theirs. But in the same breath, they can have their own that isn't yours. Now, why do I say that in terms of conflict? Because a lot of people in conflict within relationship dynamics attempt to stay connected within like problem solving of conflict for the sole purpose of getting the other person to agree with them that their perspective is true. Now, this is going to come from the fear of abandonment, or this is going to come from the fear that if another person understands something differently than you, then they're going to reject you, or they're going to punish you, or there's going to be some sort of harm, or they're going to disconnect from you, or love is going to be taken away, the fear of abandonment, right? That like your persistent need to get them to accept your version of events or reality comes from specifically the core wound that if they don't, you're in danger. That's where it comes from, right? But I want to offer this to you today, that you can have completely different perspectives of the same internal experience and walk away with both of them being fundamentally true for each person. But your need to get them to accept your version of events, and or your inability to accept that their perspective is different than yours, and to walk in parallel, saying, yep, that was your experience, this is mine, your inability to do that is a limitation on yourself that you are imposing onto people around you because of your own fear or insecurity. Or maybe just intellectually you're incapable. Well, I don't know. But like, the point is that when you meet, or encounter individuals who are not capable of finding new information to change their opinion, accepting new information to change their opinion, looking for new information to change their opinion, or simply cannot accept that your internal experience can be different than theirs, that is not really something that you should spend a whole lot of time accepting directive from about who you are as a person, or what you should believe to be true as a person. Because the moment someone else starts telling you how to think or what to think, without allowing you to determine what you should think yourself, you're stepping into like a very hierarchical power dynamic style relationship, for one. But for two, you risk, like, you're losing autonomy and agency in that environment, because someone else is demanding or commanding from or to you what to do, be, believe, or become. And 9 times out of 10, they don't have to live with the consequences of their own instruction, because it's not their life that they're preaching over, it's yours, right? So the interpersonal differentiation, the ability to recognize that two people have different experiences and that theirs does not be your own, to maintain your own individual identity and perspective in a relationship, in conjunction with the intersubjectivity of the awareness that two different perceptions of the same internal experience can exist simultaneously, is extremely fundamental in the process of navigating conflict and peace within a relationship. I love you, and I hope that helps.